We're in the Mishnah on Lamed Bet Amud Bet, and we're opening a new sugya. The syntax of the Mishnah itself will be a question because it will sound so similar to a Mishnah that we know and love and that we spent the better part of months parsing line by line. It's on page 32b, the Mishnah, Hadas Hagazul V'Hayavesh Pasul Shel Asher V'Shel Nidachat Pasul Nektam Rosha Nifritzu Olav. All of this is lifted and put back down from the world of Lulav. It's all the same. There's like a carryover from the world of Lulav to the world of Hadas, which tells us that, again, while we focused on Lulav at the outset for various reasons, as the Rishonim describe, whether because of its prominence, actually because of its height, and it's the bracha is on Lulav, whether it has to do with the reality that the Lulav is the aspect that gets shaken more than the others, and therefore it takes on the most prominent role in terms of its tefillah component, or whether there's some other aspect, whether you want to go homiletic and various ideas about what the lulav represents in terms of the kapot marim, etc. That's neither here nor there for tonight. But when we get to Hadas, we note that it's the same issues. Hadas, Agazul, Vayavesh Pasul. The Gemara will spend no time on this because Vide on the Mishnah about Lulav, it's the same issue. We covered that. Check. Same idea with regard to Hadas. So you get a flavor that the Gemara, the Mishnah rather, wants to highlight now the distinctions between the world of Hadas, what makes Hadas unique, first by showing its commonality to the world of the Lulav. And of course, there are unique characteristics to it. So right away we get to Nektam Rosho, that's the first discrepancy. Nektam Rosho means that the top was lopped off. But what do we mean by the top being actually lopped off? Does it mean that the top is missing? So the Rosh writes in the name of the Ravid that we're talking about only in a case where the actual top was completely cut off, meaning the top leaves, the whole layer of them is missing, and all we have sticking out is a twig, as opposed to the possibility that maybe Nektam Rosho would not include a case where someone had clipped the top leaves, but that the stem is extant. The leaves start coming out, but part of the top of each of the leaves is missing. That's not the same thing as it is in the world of Lulav. In Lulav, any part of the top, that's what Nektam Rosho meant in the world of Lulav. If you go back to 29b, that's what we had over there, right? It mentioned that Nektam Rosho, which actually meant that the top of it was missing leaves. It was cut at all. And here, this is the distinction. Unlike the Lulav, which is, of course, one shedra, one spine, with the leaves all coming up, and anything missing from the top would invalidate it. At least as far as the Rishonim are concerned, it could be that when we speak about the world of Hadas, the Nektam Rosho means the stem at the top is missing, that's the problem. But maybe the alim, the leaves at the top, if part of them is clipped off, maybe that's not so much of a problem, so much of an issue, worthy of consideration. Okay, so just something to think about. Okay, the Meiri disagreed. The Meiri thought it's exactly the same as it is with Lulav, and that's why the phraseology is identical. Nektam Rosha means any part of the top that's missing, then that's what will, obviate its worthiness for use. Then we come to Nifritzu Olav. So Nifritzu Olav in the world of Lulav, you might recall, was the leaves are disconnected, but somehow you're like reattaching them. It can mean chufya, that you tied them like a broom, you did something. Here Nifritzu means, according to Rashi, Nashru. They actually literally fell off. And this can happen with your Hadassim, right? They get dried out and they just kind of fall all the way up. We'll see soon how many of them have to fall off. All of them, some of them, one of them. How strict is it? We'll see how far we get tonight when we get down to the practical halacha. And then we come to the elements that actually differentiate the world of Hadas from that which came before. O shahayu anavav merubot me'alav pasul v'im miyatan kasher v'enumatin b'yom tov. There are on the Hadassim, unlike on the Lulav, berries that sometimes grow. And those berries, if there are more berries than there are leaves, that in and of itself is a psul. But it's not an irrevocable psul. If you pick off the berries, you can make it kosher again. And the Mishnah handily points out you cannot do this on Yom Tov. Working hypothesis about why this may be is because you are fixing it and you can't be matakein a kli on Yom Tov. We'll get to this in the Gemara. That won't be for tonight. It's too far afield. But we'll just sort of bookmark it. Why can you fix it, but you can't fix it on Yom Tov? So when are you fixing it? Can you fix it on Chol Moed? Or does it mean you have to fix it before Yom Tov altogether? What about the fact that it's a Dvar Mitzvah? And what is the problem with Anavav Merubot? So Rashi further along is going to say that the issue is that it's not just that there are little berries growing on it. The berries have to be black or red. They have to be a different color. If they're green, then it would be kosher because they're going to blend in. They look like the leaves themselves. And of course, they are quite literally organically fused to and grew naturally on this branch. There's Yerushalmi I saw quoted where the Yerushalmi in Sukka says that if they're red or black, it means that they ripened and therefore they're ready to be picked. And therefore we have a problem. The pasuk in the Torah said, "Ulakachtem lachem be'marishon pri eitz hadar, comma." Then it went to other elements. So the pri eitz hadar, that's the only fruit on the list. When it got to hadasim, it's anaf eitz avot. So you can't say any longer that you've taken a fruit called an etrog and a branch called the hadasim, anaf eitz avot. The anaf eitz avot literally means the shoot of the tree that is covered over. It's woven on top. It's concealed. If you're actually carrying fruit, and you have more fruit than you do leaves, branch, shoot, etc. So here, the Yerushalmi says that's the problem. If you already have them red and green, clearly they're already ripened, and now you've taken a fruit. Now, whether it's an edible fruit or not is immaterial. The point is, it's the fruit of this piece of vegetation. There's a question about what the psul is here. In the world of lulav, we knew the psul. As the Mishnah, the Gemara told us right at the beginning on 29b, the Gemara is going to skip that this time, skip completely. But we had at the beginning of the Gemara on 29b, in the world of lulav, the first consideration was the issue of, in terms of yavesh, we need hadar. All right, remember, has to look nice. So yavesh is no good because of hadar. There it was lulav hagazul vayavesh pasol. Here it's hadas hagazul vayavesh pasol. So gazul, same problem, stolen mitzvah bavera. Insert all the discussion there. But is the issue here really an issue of hadar? Rashi throughout the Gemara seems to assume that it is the same kind of idea. All of these things, nektam rosho, nifritzu alav, anavav, merubot, mi alav, all of these things are a psul of hadar. It lacks a beauty, and that's the problem. But the Ritva points out that that's not necessarily so for all of them. The issue particularly for, and remember how we got into this. At the beginning of the pasuk, the famous pasuk, do I have to put it on the screen? Everybody remembers it. People remember it? Parshat Emor, right? The main pasuk, L'kachtem lachem, Bayom HaRishon, 3 eitz hadar, right? Kapot tamarim v'anaf eitz avot v'arvei nachal. So usmakim v'neshim l'kachel. So where's the word hadar? It's on the etrog. But we said, no, it goes on all of the elements. They all need an element of hadar. The Ritva says to the Rashi, I agree with you. If it's missing the top, that doesn't look nice. I agree with you that if the leaves have come off, it doesn't look nice. But if the problem here really is that there are too many, there's an issue here that there's not enough coverage. So maybe the twig still looks pretty nice. Maybe you could say, well, it's sort of hadar. The problem is, says the Ritva, is an extra requirement of avot. Avot means, again, that it is interwoven, covering one part over the other, and that's no longer extant if you've lost a goodly number of leaves. Now, how many leaves, that's part of the discussion. But at least conceptually, there's maybe a distinction between hadas and lulav, whereas lulav, the basic ideas of hidur, it can't be dried out, it can't be missing a part, but maybe there's something unique to the world of hadas that is not found in the world of the lulav, and that is that for the hadasim, you require avot. And if you're missing that characteristic of avot, even if you want to say, well, it's not that they're completely gone, but some number of them is gone, we don't have the requisite number, whatever that's going to be. That's the Gemara. We don't have the right number, so now we're missing the requirement of avot. That's what's unique to it. So the etrog has its unique characteristics, the lulav its unique characteristics, the hadas has its unique characteristics, a ravut as well, and that's really part of the sort of the thought process that goes into the discussion of the Gemara. Let me pause here for questions, comments, and arguments. Okay, either amazing explaining it or everyone got it so simple. What?
A late question here.
Yeah.
Avot means the thickness?
I can't hear you.
Avot means the thickness?
No, not like ava, like thickness, but avot here refers to something that is overlapping and covering. Remember that the hadasim, they're one on top of the other. They're laid on top of the other, sort of layered.
Overlap.
Benny, what did you want to say?
I said the overlap.
Overlap. That's what I'm looking for. Thank you. They overlap. If anyone wants to weigh in about what the actual root of the word is it the same as the root word as ava? Maybe. Testing my Hebrew skills, and obviously they've come to the bar of judgment.
And then the thickness of the cloud. So Ab also has this idea of thick.
But also something that's covering. Av. Oh, that's good. But av he'anan. So it's something is a thickness, but the point of the thickness is that it's concealing or covering something. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Could be.
So let's look a little bit into Gemara together. Yeah. Let's see what we have here. And you can tell when a Gemara starts off and it skips a whole section of the Mishnah. Why did it skip it? Because it talked about it already. Check. Agazel, done. Yavesh, done. Shalasher, Shanadachat, good, done. So it starts right away trying to understand what is Anaf Eitz Avot. That's why it goes right in for that idea. What do those words actually mean in the Torah? How do we know that it's a Hadas and not something else? And I'll remind you just by the by that we had this discussion when we were learning already about Lulav. I mentioned that the Rambam, we saw it on the screen, in fact, the Rambam is Hakdama Seder, the Parish of Mishnayot in Seder Zraim. What does he say? We would not know what these species truly look like if not for one thing, the Masorah. We have not transferred them to other objects. We've not transmogrified them into other species. It's always been these. That's our faith claim. And we claim that we got it from one generation to the next, all the way back to the days when Yeshua ben Nun first comes into the land. And that's the first time that they take the Daled Minim when they arrive in the land. So any suffix that we're discussing here about what the source of it might be is itself a question, since the actual source in the sum of all things is the Masorah. There are characteristics, but could there not be other? The Gemara is querying first. Could there not be other kinds of species that would fit the bill? That would be the same. They would make the grade. They'd be exactly the same as what we actually do use in terms of using what we call the Hadas in English called the myrtle branch. The myrtle branch sounds foreign to me, but I know what Hadasim look like. So, okay.
We need
the Gemara goes into this.
Rabbi,
yeah, please, Yehuda.
That it's all predicated on the fact that they have to grow in the land of Israel.
The Rambam writes that the reason why, in the Mor Nevuchim, the Rambam writes the reason why these species were chosen is Davka, because they're from the land of Israel. That is what he writes, and he writes that they're plentiful in the land of Israel. And Yericho is famous for what kind of tree? Davka?
Tamarim. Tamarim. The palms.
Yeah, the date palms, exactly.
Date palms, yeah.
When you drive on Kvish Tishim in Eretz Yisrael, what do you see facing you on the right-hand side? If you're going Kvish Tishim to north, due north, on the right-hand side, it's rows and rows and rows of date palms. The Rambam who of course did make a trip to Eretz Yisrael. Whether he knew this before from his Rebbeim or not, I don't know. But of course, living in Egypt, a lot of date palms there too. It says Eretz Yisrael is known to have in the area of Yericho many, many date palms. So there's a beautiful drasha to be inserted here. I don't want to go too far afield, but of course, you could fill in the blank. You have a Dvar Torah already. We just came through beautiful Pesach, Baruch Hashem. Now we're going to come to a beautiful Sukkot. You remind everybody, you see these species, it might, wherever it grew in the world, and I want to make this point to you, Judith, so there's no mistake. It doesn't actually have to grow in Eretz Yisrael. I maintain that's because it would have been too challenging to always insist that Klal Yisrael has to go back to Eretz Yisrael to get it each time. And what would they do in years when they couldn't? So, okay, if you get it from Italy, you get it from Egypt or wherever. But Eretz Yisrael is the place where it's from. You say there's a sample of the kind of fruit that grows in Eretz Yisrael that we raise up in our service of Hashem. Not unlike the way, by the way, that if you eat from the Shivat Haminim, from Eretz Yisrael, even if you're not in Eretz Yisrael, even if you never grew in Eretz Yisrael, you're still going to make the bracha la'etz v'al pri etz to remind you of the beauty of the land of Israel. And why is that true? That's the point. Is the Zion Minim are associated with the land of Israel. So whenever I taste them, whenever I see them, I'm very excited. I'm actually tasting the perot of Eretz Yisrael. So okay, and I tried to do that for the matzah for Pesach. If you saw the matzah mehuderet made by it's the one the CRC put a gushpanka on, the kashrut on. It's made in Eretz Yisrael in Sderot. I saw a video of how they make it there. After that, I said to Lord, we got to try as much as we can to get that matzah. It's like it's supporting the Jews of Sderot. Amazing. But they do. There's people on the ground from CRC, and there's cameras that they're always watching from America. What's going on in the factory? It's like a whole system. But mamash, you're helping the Yidden from Sderot. So I consider it the most Zionish matzah you could eat. So it's the same thing with the Daled Minim. If you could get it from Eretz Yisrael, Matov Manaim, you're helping Jewish people there. Okay, so back to the Gemara, back to the mainstream of our symposium. Tanu Rabbanan, Anaf Eitz Avot, She'anafav Chofin et Eitzo. It's so that somehow the shoots, that's what's coming out, covers the wood. It means that the leaves are going to cover the twig. They're going to cover the piece of wood. Ve'ezehu. Hadas. So how do we know which one it is? The answer is it's the Hadas. Look at Rashi. Anaf eitz avot shekulo anaf. She'ha'etz mechupe ba'alin al yedei shein asuin bekliya v'shochvin al apehen. That it looks in such a way that the whole thing is a shoot, a tendril. Meaning to say that the stem, which the wood that's underneath it, is covered with leaves that are bekliya. They're braided. Maybe that was the word I was looking for before. Sometimes they overlap. They're braided upon it, and they are lying one on the other. That's the overlap part. V'shochin al apehen. That's how they're set up. Davka. So the Gemara says, wait a minute. Ve'ema zeta. What about using the olive branches? That's also something that has long branches and it has leaves on it that are also one on top of the other. Very beautiful, very symbolic. Eretz Yisrael, whatever you want to throw in there. It doesn't mention Eretz Yisrael, so that I should insert. But the Gemara says, yeah, but ba'inan avot veleka. But in the Eitz HaZayit, when it comes to the olive branch, it actually lacks this important characteristic, which is the characteristic of overlapping and looking braided. Yeah, it's true. They're long, they a little bit overlap, but they're not one on top of the other in mesh.
They're not dense enough.
Huh?
The leaves of the zayit are not dense enough.
Yeah. We'll see there's going to be another characteristic also, but the Gemara is sort of asking. So, ve'ema dulva. Dulva is some other kind of a tree. Art scroll? What's a dulva?
Chestnut.
Oh, is it
Chestnut
the
tree.
tree?
Chestnut tree.
Chestnut tree? Thank you. Chestnut tree.
So
Okay.
I have sycamore.
Pardon?
I have sycamore in my notes.
In what? In your notes? Sycamore? Okay.
Yeah.
Chestnut, a sycamore. So
The tree.
there's another tree. So you say,
Some
okay.
kind of a tree,
Oh,
right?
you have it. This works. So the Gemara says, no, it's also not going to work. Why? Because the Gemara says the same problem, but it has to actually be that you're going to have these the extensions are actually covering the eights, and we actually don't have that. It doesn't. There's actually a space between each row, and that's not going to work. So the Gemara now asks, "Vema hirduf." What about the hirduf? What's the problem with the hirduf? The Gemara has two answers about the problem with the hirduf. Here also, it's not clear why is this being thrown out. The hirduf also seems like it's braided. Rashi writes, "Kamin kaliya asuyin alav," again like a braided way. And the Gemara says Abaye and Rava disagree. Amar Abaye drachad darchei noam, has to be the way of pleasantness. Veleka, and it's not pleasant. Rashi tells us Vahai mivares baris et hayadayim kikotzim. It has jagged edges, and that's like thorns. Shiroshe alav asuin chadin kemachat. The tops of each of the leaves are sharp like a needle. Therefore, you can't use it. Rava Amar Mehacha. Rava says it's actually found from another pasuk from Zechariah. Ve'emet ve'ashalom ehavu. You should love truth and peace, and we don't have that. We're missing it. Rashi v'ze'enu lo emet v'lo shalom shu asui l'sam hamavet. It's made to kill, and therefore that's not going to be appropriate to be used for the purpose of fulfilling the mitzvah of the Daled Minim. What's going on over here? Why do you think, I'm throwing it out there, why is there some element of the sort of the appearance of it that its character should matter either about Drachad Darchei Noam or about Emet V'Shalom Ehavu? In other words, like Rav and Abaye are actually arguing about the ethical import or the ethical symbolism of the appearance of the Hadasim, whether maybe they have a jagged edge, or maybe because they have some kind of a poison associated with them. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts? Why would that be true as a factor? So those of us who are more inclined to see an atomized view of halacha over here, hashkafa over here, right? Hard-nosed, computational, definitional understandings of elements of halacha that's in one magisterium, and a separate and distinct realm that's called homily, which is abstract, is about connecting elements, which is certainly not analytical in the computational sense of it. It has much more of a right brain approach, if you will. They're in two separate magisteria. And because there was like a scarcity of space in the Gemara, so instead of making it neat and tidy and giving us just a book of halacha and then a book of hashkafa, so they had to make a chont and they threw everything in together. But that seems not to be correct. Here's a great example in front of our eyes where an aspect of the halacha actually has a hashkafic impact that we learn from the source of the halacha. It was this that the Rebbe of my Rebbeim, whose yahrzeit was just this past Chol HaMoed Pesach, passed away in 1993, but his influence is still felt very much. Rav Soloveitchik Zatzal built all of his hashkafa in terms of how he wanted to understand a worldview grounded in the world of halacha. He did this in so many different realms, but here is a great example. You know what the problem is with the hirduf? Hirduf's a lovely species, nothing wrong with it except for one problem. Either it looks like and will feel like something that will be challenging to hold in your hand. It's not pleasant, it's unpleasantness. It scratches and gives you cuts. Alternatively, it is poisonous. And we don't want to hold something that's poisonous in our hand and wave it in front of Hashem in jubilation.
It's a very common hardof. In modern Hebrew, it's called hardof.
What is it today?
And
vegetable?
No, on the divides on the roads and the highways, they have those, and they are poisonous, and the leaves are indeed very sharp, and they are about 4 or 5 times the length of the hadassim. So it's not a gentle, good-smelling piece. It's
Interesting. So there's one challenge to the issue of the Hardof, or Hirduf, as I have it here, but Tosfot start to try to engage right here. There's two Tosfot team, one after the other. That's verbatim. That's what Rashi said. Tosfot just quoted approvingly. And they begin by quoting in the next one, Va'emet v'shalom ehavu. They begin by quoting Rashi, and it sounds like they're quoting Rashi approvingly. V'ze'eno lo emet v'shalom. It's not truth. It's not peace. Shu aslu samamavet kach akuntras. That's what Rashi wrote. But Valchinam huzkak lomar tam bifnei atzmo a kol kara. So Rashi, for naught really was Rashi somehow compelled to give a different reason for each of these different psukim. The issue about Abaye that it's scratching. The issue for Rava is that it's a poisonous element. Dechol chad shayach atarvaya. The truth is, each element applies to the other as well. We could have learned the limud that Rava had to be posel the hirduf because of the pasuk emet v'shalom ehavu. That it's not emet, it's not shalom. You know why? Because it scratches. And you could have learned what Abaye said. Dracheh darchei noam could have been said about the hirduf, even though Abaye said that was the reason because of the hirduf, because of samhamavet. Why did Rashi, ask Tosfot, decide to put the pasuk dracheh darchei noam as the issue of scratching, and emet and shalom ehavu which is what was the other idea that was brought up? Why is that associated with the sam hamavet and not vice versa? So pretty much to say it seems arbitrary. So they explain as follows: mitoch perusho, the fact, in other words, that Rashi explained that the hirduf is not emet and shalom ehavu because it's a poisonous species of to eat as a weed or as a plant. Mashma de hirduf hainu hirdufni. It sounds like the hirduf that's talking about here is the same thing as hirdufni mentioned in Parak Elu Treifot, which is in Masechet Chulin, with regard to the Treifot that the Mishnah lists when the animal is considered a treifa and when not. So it mentions achuzat dam, that it retains blood and it became ill. Va'meushenet, that it had smoke, it had a smoke inhalation. And then it says, V'sha'achla hirdufni. So either that it has too much blood in it as an animal. I'm talking about different kinds of a treifa, right? Remember, a treifa means an animal that has very little time to live. Inside of 12 months, it's not going to survive because of some kind of an ailment that we can identify. There's too much blood, a surfeit of blood, so it got sick as a result. It has a smoke inhalation. It has eaten hirdufni, shehu samamavet labehema. It is fatal for animals. So in that case, we say that actually, if it ate the hirdufni, that's actually not going to be a sign of treifa. You know why? Because even though it'll die in the end, it's not actually something wrong with its organs per se. By the way, smoke inhalation also, and the too much blood is flowing in the organs, but the organs are fine. So they're not treifas per se. So as a result of this, Rashi explains here that emet and shalom, because it is not emet and shalom because it is an elixir of death for animals. And hirduf, according to Tosfot, Rashi thinks the same thing as hirdufni. And therefore he put emet and shalom, because the animal doesn't have emet and shalom because it dies. Not a question of pleasantness or lack thereof. It's actually a lack of life. It's gone as a result of eating this element. Therefore he put the samhamavet one with emet and shalom. But say the Bai Tosfot differentiating themselves and disagreeing with Rashi, v'efshar lomar kain. We can't say this. You know why? You can't say hirduf equals hirdufni. Even though the animal ate hirdufni and could die from it, it does die from it, and if it's a samhamavet, but that's not what hirduf is. Pay attention, anyone who learned Daf Yomi recently. This was just a few months ago. And a parak kol shah, Mesechet Pesachim, gabe maror, If you ate here dufni for Mar on Pesach, you yotze. It's one of the elements of Mar. The hirduf, pasal hatam, and yet hirduf listed there in that Gemara is actually puzzle to be used as Mar. Hirduf puzzle, hirdufni kosher. So they're two different elements. Mishum dema matzah mean zeraim of Mar means zeraim. As matzah is that which grows from the ground, meaning it comes from wheat, which is associated with plants, but not trees. So too, the hirdufni, that you're allowed to use is also a min zraim, and that's not something as hirduf, which is actually a type of tree. So it's just an interesting sidebar, something to think about. By the by, Rashi explained the word hirduf in the Gemara in Psachim, which is not allowed to be used for maror, as the element that was used to be as the eitz, vayoreu Hashem eitz, that God showed Moshe Rabbeinu a bitter tree and bid him to throw it into the bitter waters after Kriyat Yamsuf. We just read it, Shal Pesach, right? 2 days ago. So what did we read? There's bitter waters, the people can't drink. Hashem shows Moshe Rabbeinu there's a tree. It's known to be a bitter tree. It's called hirduf. It's a samam of it. He told him throw it in the water. It'll sweeten the water, and in fact, it does miraculously. Sham sam lo chok mishpat v'sham niso. And hirduf is not the same thing as hirdufni, and therefore we have here the idea that these are actually two different elements, and Tosfot disagree with Rashi's characterization of hirdufni as an aspect of a potion that is poisonous. There is such a thing. There is such an idea, but it's not going to be hirdufni because actually for people, we can eat hirdufni and could be yotze the mitzvah of maror with hirdufni. Okay, so we got in a Tosfot tonight, so that's good. Good. Any other questions, comments, thoughts? Next part of the Gemara. Moving on. Yes. Okay. I'm right now. Second line of the wide lines in the Gemara. Last word on the line. Tanu, as in Tanu Rabbana. Yeah. Okay. So we have here Tanu Rabbana. Kalua Kamin Kalia. V'domel shalshalat zeu hadas. It needs to be braided in a braided manner, and it looks like a chain. That's a hadas. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer, anaf eitz avot, eitz shetam eitza upirio shave. It's an eitz whose wood and fruit are equivalent. Now, I told you before that it has berries, so it does have a fruit, and it could be that that's what Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov means. And anaf eitz avot, why is he referring to the word eitz? That it's bringing up the word eitz, just like pre-eitz hadar, and one of the characteristics of the etrog is tam eitz shetam eitza upirio shave. So maybe it's the same thing with hadas, which would be very, very nice, because this would be a characteristic that is unlike the lulav, its fruit. The lulav, the fruit is the tmarim, and the aravot, which have no fruit. The hadasim have a mini little fruit, so they share a characteristic with etrog in this way. There's here in my Gemara, the Hagot V'Tziyunim quotes from the Ritva. The Ritva disagreed. He thought that this was not a correct version of the Gemara. The printers always hold tremendous sway. And the Rum Shas is, of course, the printing done by the widow Rum and the brothers Rum. So that's what they wrote based on the manuscripts they had. The Ritva, in his version, he says, I've seen this version. It's wrong. We're not really talking about any element that has tam eitz superior shav except for the etrog and its branches. However, this must be, I have it in the margin, it must be she'anafav chofin et eitzo. Eitz avot, anaf eitz avot means that the anafim cover the wood. The Hagot V'Tziyunim points out also that in the Rif, in the original printing of the Rif, Tfus Rishon, and in the manuscripts, it says there eitz shetam eitzo va'anafav shaveh, that the wood and the shoots, meaning the leaves, they are equal. Okay, whatever it is, any of these possibilities. That's these are all the realities of what happens when manuscripts become printed texts. There are certain discrepancies, but Hevei Omer Zeh Hadas. But the point is, even if we're going to say it's not exactly like the etrog. Again, the etrog, the whole point is, we always make a point of saying this, that with the etrog, tam eitzu upirio shave, the fruit and the tree, they have the same taste. There's a continuity between the source and the offspring, as opposed to normally where the tree is inedible and the fruit is edible. Here, they're all the same taste. That's etrog, and that's what makes it so special. When it comes to hadas, maybe it has some kind of a shared characteristic. Maybe it's not the fruit and the wood, but maybe it's the anaf and the wood and the eitz that are the same. So indeed, oftentimes we try to describe that the hadas has a certain representation, if you will, of being also associated with some element of righteousness, if you will, and something to consider about its continuity with its source as well. Tana. Then the Gemara keeps going as follows. Eitz avot kasher v'she'eno avot pasul. If it's interwoven, overlapped, etc., that's kosher. But if it's not, that's pasul. Well, the question is going to be, of course, to what extent? Heichidami, avot. What do you mean by avot? Amar Rav Yehuda, v'udekame tlata tlate tarpe bekina. It means that you have 3 leaves coming out of the same stem bud.
Level.
On the same level, but also that they're all out of the same source. So when it sprouts the leaves, when you look at the hadassim, I had hadassim, by the way, until 2 Fridays ago, and then I incinerated them in a canister in a parking lot, so I don't have them anymore. But we all had it, or many of us had it in the house till then. They were dried out, granted. But if you look carefully, you could find hadassim where the 3 leaves are actually, all 3 of them, coming out of the exact same point of exit from the stem. And that's the first possibility. Rav Kahana disagreed. Rav Kahana amar afilu trei v'chad. Rav Kahana said even if you have 2 plus 1, meaning there's 2 on 1 from 1, and 1 that's coming from another, and even maybe another level, but is maybe at least overlapping, maybe that would be good enough. Rav Acha b'rei d'Rava mahadera trei v'chad. Hovenofik mipun Rav Kahana. Rav Acha, the son of Rava, was makpid. He would go find the trei v'chad setup on purpose. Why was he so keen on it? He wanted to be able to show that he lives by whatever his Rebbe, Rav Kahana, says. Therefore, he went and got that. Amar le mar baramemar le Rav Ashi abba lehu hadas shota karile. My father called this a hadas that was mad. A shota would be like we have cheresh shota v'katan, someone who's incompetent, mentally incompetent, right? So that's the idea. It doesn't work. That's a polite way of saying, maybe not so polite, it's derisive. It's not really going to be. It's not kosher. You cannot use this. And of course, as you see, you don't have to be a big Talmud scholar, an academic Talmud to know Rav Ashi and Ravina are at the end of Shas chronologically. So when you see their names already mentioned, the halacha is already going usually according to the halacha kebatrai. So Mar, the son of Amemar, said to Rav Ashi, my father called that the hadas shota, and he didn't like it. It wasn't good. Look with me at Rashi. Tlata b'chad kina. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines up from in the narrow lines of Rashi. Tlata 3 by 3 b'chad kina. Rashi tells us specifically shlosha alin b'kan echad yotzin mitoch oketz echad. The oketz is the stem. So it's 3 from the same stem. They're popping out of exactly the same stem. And conversely, Rav Kahana thought trei v'chad would be good enough. Shnei alin be'oketz echad ve'ala echad milamata, one is a little bit lower. V'ola v'rochev ala shnayim. The lower one, even though it's a little farther down, it overlaps it rides on the other 2. and therefore covers it, and that should be as it were good enough. Yeah. So that was the view of how Rashi explained it. The Bali Tosfot didn't like this either. The Bali Tosfot thought against Rashi. They thought this. When are you ever going to find this? It's really very, very unlikely that Plata Tarpe Bechad Kina means 3 little leaves coming out of one stem. You'd have to have that on the whole line. Yeah, it's very rare. You wouldn't have too much to say that's kosher there. It doesn't really mean that. They say what really this refers to is they have to be on the same line from different points of exit, but the same horizontal plane. And that's more likely what it means. Look at Tosfot here on the right hand side of the page. Tlata tarpe bechad kina, shlosha alin bekan echad, v'yotzi mitoch oketz echad, kidepirish bekuntras. Exactly what he said. V'chein pirish, and he also explained trei v'chad, shnei alin beoketz echad, v'ale echad milamata v'olav v'rochav al shnayim. This is just quoting Rashi verbatim, so I'm skipping through it for want of time. But write the Bali Tosfot, v'churma gedolahu, de'eno matzui. This is a very big chumrah. We don't find this too often. V'shema b'chad kina mikrei, shem smuchim udvukim zeh b'zeh, af pish kol echad be'oktzo. What it probably means is chad kina means on one level where they're next to each other, they're cleaving to each other, even though they each have their own particular stem. Yeah, and even though it's very rare that you're going to find this sort of thing. The reality of what we see in front of us in general, because of how it goes, right? If you had 3 in the same place, that would also be good. Umihu, according to the note I have, it's v'chein tlata b'kina chad havu yatve kida amar perak akones shlosha dekalim. If you had 3 trees, and uses the expression there, b'shoresh echad, not b'shorach, b'shoresh echad. Chmokein shlosha alin, einan me'oketz echad doesn't mean they necessarily have to be literally from the same stem. It just means they're right next to each other and they're overlapping. And they disagree with Rashi. We try most people are not makbid on what Rashi says here. They go with what Tosfot says. A couple of years ago, there was a big discussion. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, one of the rebbeim of the CRC started raising the reality, the fact that we spend a lot of time in the store trying to make sure to choose a proper etrog, and we're checking it for any problems, which we should. And then we make sure that the lulav is not split, nefska tiomet, nothing's cut off, that it's straight, that it's not bent, all different things, as we learned. But then comes the Hadas, and we pick up a package and we just run away with it. And he pointed out that, if your Hadasim are not good, you don't have Daled Minim. Aravot is, we'll see soon, very hard to mess up Aravot. They're much simpler. But Hadasim, people don't realize if you look at it through the bag and they're not actually on the same level, it's questionable if it's kosher. So you got to look through each one. Are they on the same level? That's what's going on when they put it in the bag and they shrink wrap it and then they say, the hashgacha of so and so and so. That's what it means. That ostensibly they had someone check each row to see that it's actually close enough that they're not on different levels. Worthy of consideration. Okay, questions, comments. Let me pause here for a minute, catch my breath.
Just a quick story. When I was in high school, my Rebbe said to us, when you go to a farm store,
yeah,
first thing you do is ask to see the Hadas, because it's the hardest thing.
Wow.
So I get married, move out to Chicago, go to a bookstore that's no longer in existence.
All right.
Say to the rabbi, can I see the Hadassim? He said, pick out an esrog first, and then you can see the Hadassim. CRC rabbi.
Okay. That was interesting. And by the way, as a result of this thing that I mentioned, there was a push in Chicago to look again and again at the Hadassim. There's a letter, you could see it each year now that comes out, reminding everybody, make sure the Hadassim are good. Don't just pick it up and go and it's fine, whatever it is. Because actually this matters. So, okay, there you have it. Maybe that rabbi was trying to make sure you bought a nice etrog first, so you wouldn't run out of the store if you don't like the hadassim.
Right.
That's where the money is.
Huh?
That's where the money is.
That's where the money is, apparently. Apparently. In Chutzlaritz, that's where the money is. Okay. Tanarabban, Nashru Rov Olav and Ishtaru Bo Miut Kasher. If most of the leaves fell off, but you have at least a minimum number of leaves, doesn't say how many, but a minimum number of leaves that are still going to be left, will vajte avoto kayemet. As long as you have at least the overlap is still intact, that will be enough. The Gemara recoils reciting this Braita, as they're wondering, what are you talking about? Hagufa Kashya. This is a contradiction in terms. Amarti, originally you said, Nashu Rov Alav Kasher. First you said if most of the leaves fall off, it's still kosher. V'hadatani, then you went back and you said, in the same sentence, Uvach te avoto kayemet, but it has to be avot. So, wait a second. Kevan denatre lehutre. If there's only 2 leaves left, right? If 2 out of the 3 are gone, most of the leaves are gone on the row. There's only 1 left. So avot hechem ishkachala. It's not covering the stem anymore. That's not kosher. Right? So the Gemara, in other words, has this assumption that when it says if most of the leaves fell off, it means most of the leaves on a particular row. 2 out of 3 fell off. So Abaye says, wait a minute. No. You know what we're talking about here? Mishkachala ba'asa mitzra'ah. We're talking about a particular kind of hadas called the hadas of mitzra'ah. The kaimi shiva b'chad kina. That actually the hadas mitzra'ah has 7 leaves coming off of every stem at the exit point. Whether, again, Rashi from the same stem, from the same, literally the same okas, the same stem coming off the twig. Tosfot, okay, it's 7. They're all on the same line, the same level. Rashi, top of the page, 2 possibilities. What's the asa mitzra'ah? Option 1, gadel al hametzar shel sadeh. It grows at the fringe of the field. That's one option. Option 2 is when we talk sheyesh lo makom panui. There's an extra space, an open space, or what have you. Who mishabeach umatzliach. It's going to do very well. It gets a lot more water. It gets a lot more sunlight. It flourishes. Lishnachrin. Another option is asa mitzra hadas mitzri. It's the hadas that comes from Mitzrayim. 2 possibilities, but there's something strange with it, right? Instead of 3 on a line, it's 7 on a line. So if most of the leaves fall off, what's most of 7? 4. You still have 3 left. It's still going to be machapis. Abai says, solved your problem. Not really going to be an issue, right? The chinatre arba pashul hotlata. 4 fall away. 3 is still left. So Amar Abaye Shmamina Haim Asa Mitzra Kosher Hoshana. We learned from this that the Asa Mitzra is kosher to be used as the Hoshana. Now, what's the Hoshana actually? We learned already earlier on in our own Gemara, in our parak, that was back, if you remember, the Hadas sellers that were described on, 30a, where they were being instructed, don't buy directly from the guys who cut it, buy it from the guys who bought it, from the guys who bought it, who sell it in case it's a stolen one. Remember that story? In Karkan Nigzela, and therefore there wasn't going to be a Kenyan, and it wasn't really theirs, and they're really the thieves. So all of that discussion reminds us, in that context, called it Hoshana, and the Gemara said, why is it called the Hoshana? Because when you say Hoshana, you're holding the lulav with the Hadassim and the Ravot in a bundle with the etrog on the side, so the whole bundle together is called a Hoshana. So he basically says the Asa Mitzra is kosher for the Hoshana. The Gemara says, Pshita, isn't that obvious? That the Hadas Mitzri, Hadas, it's called a Hadas. Isn't that a Hadas? Abai has to tell you that? No. Mo detema hoil v'itle shem Levi. Since this word attached to it, it's not a regular Hadas, Hadas Mitzray. And we're so worried about the Masorah and what does it look like, right? So you might have thought, Lomit Kasha, because you added a word to it. Okay, Kamash Malan, therefore we learn, even though that's what Abai teaches us, Hadas Mitzray is also considered halachli a Hadas. So the Gemara says, Ve'ema hachinami. So say, okay, very good, that anytime there's a word, Hadas, that's any other word associated with it, maybe it is actually problematic, right? Maybe indeed that is the problem. That Hadas that has something with it is actually going to negate it, because after all, it does refer, and most of the Braita just calls it Hadas. So the Gemara answers Eitz Avot. The fact that the Torah never called it by the word Hadas, but it called it Eitz Avot. So we learn from this, Mikol Makom. Anything that has Avot about it, it would automatically be kosher, even if it has another name associated with it right next to it, i.e., the word Mitzray that goes next to it. Okay, much more to say. I think I have to stop here because my voice is getting scratchy and forgot to bring water, and I have to make other calls tonight still. So let's stop here. Next week or the week after, one of these weeks, we will have to switch the shir to be a little bit later. I'll tell you right now so no one will be confused. Next week, we can still learn at 8 o'clock as far as I can see. Next week will still be good. In 2 weeks will probably be the week we have to switch. But next week, let's say we're going to meet again at 8. I see here sunset 7:29. Give me one more minute to just check this so that there isn't going to be a problem. Has to do with when we can count Sphira. Half a sec more, sorry. Also, I would like to move the shir back in person, but I need clearance from the committee, and we could keep people on Zoom for if you're not comfortable coming in person. But I have to get from the Hashivenu committee. Some of my colleagues in other cities got clearance that they sit 20 feet away, they don't have to wear a mask. I'm Baruch Hashem, I got the vaccine, so from 20 feet away, is that allowed? 15 feet, whatever the number is, 12 feet, 15 feet. But until I get that, I don't want to go ahead with it. It's very, very taxing to give a shir in a mask. I did it each of the days of Yontif, and I hope it was well received, but it was very challenging. Yeah, earliest Sphira 7:49 p.m. next Monday night. So let's say we're going to learn at 8 p.m. next week. Okay, so look forward to seeing everyone then. And I say thank you very much for coming back on to share, and tell your friends and neighbors are welcome to join too. Have a good night.